Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGig webinars, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key for enhancing our performances and for our growth as professionals. With this principle in mind, TechGig has initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give a crisp insight of various domains. Today's session is fourth in the series, and topic for the webinar is Benefits and Drawbacks of Cutting-Edge ERP Options. We are delighted to have Mr. Sriram Ramji, Software Development Manager at Value Technologies Private Limited with us today. Mr. Sriram works at Value Technologies as a Software Development Manager. Gentlemen, this presentation will continue for next 45 minutes and we will take your questions after the presentation. In the meanwhile, you can post your queries through the chat pane available in the webinar software. Without further ado, I introduce you to our guest speaker, Mr. Sriram.
Thanks, everyone. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes, we can see the presentation.
Okay, good. So, yeah, okay, good. So thanks everyone for joining in on this presentation. So I'm Sriram Ramji. I'm a software development manager with Value Technologies Private Limited, based out of Delhi, an e-commerce company based out of Delhi. I have overall 13 years of software development experience, and pretty much most of it has been on enterprise applications space, in that space. Prior to this, I was working with Oracle as a development manager, managing the PeopleSoft product development team based out of Bangalore. So that's a quick intro about me. So let's get started on today's topic, the benefits and drawbacks of cutting-edge ERPs. Enterprise applications, or ERPs in general, are a pretty complex software. So consequently, any decision to go with an ERP for any organization, whether it's small, medium, large, irrespective of it, it's a pretty complicated and a very difficult decision. Courtesy of a number of software applications that are available, options that are available in terms of size, cost, deployment, variations, and everything. And each one of those come with its own pros and cons. So, well, benefits far outweigh the drawbacks in any ERP. Both these factors have to be taken fully into consideration, understood clearly before any decision is taken by the organization. So in our presentation today, we will cover the benefits of cutting-edge ERPs, benefits and drawbacks in general, and then I'll just go into a little bit detail on the ERP options that are available from a deployment perspective. Because I know there are other sessions where you're talking about general ERP selection process, so I'll concentrate here on generate benefits and drawbacks, and also talk a little bit about the deployment options that are available, which is In-Premise, which is a traditional setup, the SaaS model, which is pretty popular nowadays, and hybrid, which is coming up. So let's dive down into the benefits part of it to start with. Enterprise applications in general, as I said before, the benefits far outweigh the drawbacks in any ERP, and benefits range from architecture, technology advancements, and integration, and it covers all the business areas, the business functions in an organization. So every part of it will be benefited by an ERP, and not only from a functional standpoint but also from an employee standpoint. Employees have an application which will make things easier for them to do, which will give them information at their fingertips for them to take the decision. So the benefits are far and wide with respect to any ERP. So in the coming slides, I will talk about each and every benefit that is listed here. These are pretty much the major ones. There are a lot of trivial ones and there are smaller ones also. So I will not cover those. I will cover only the major aspect, major benefits, and they should cover almost bulk of the spectrum. Scalable architecture. Now, this is one of the real big value which a enterprise application can bring in. Present day, the demands on the organization are pretty high. Our environments change pretty quick and fast, and our systems have to keep pace with this growing demands on the organization. Organizations grow in always organic growth, inorganic growth, and also from a performance perspective, where customer base is increasing, user base is increasing. So to cater to all kinds of growth, an ERP, current cutting-edge ERPs are pretty good at this, because the architecture is designed to scale seamlessly without any with very minimal user intervention. And when I say minimal internal user intervention, it is not just minimal IT resources required to scale up to this growth. It's also from a cost perspective. The marginal cost or the incremental cost is not significantly high. It's fair to medium cost in catering to this growth. In addition, these architectures are designed for globalization and localization capabilities. These are built in. So when I say globalization and localization, what it means is organizations, whether it's small, medium, or large organization, an established organization, will have presence in multiple countries. They typically be MNCs, and so you have smaller and SMEs, which will also eventually get to that point. So an application should be able to cater to the organization's local needs. So when I say local needs, we need country-specific taxation, for example. An application should be able to support country-specific taxation policies. And it's very difficult for a company to have different applications to manage these things. An ERP is a single application, can provide these capabilities. So they have multi-country support, multi-language, multi-currency, and local policies and standards and guidelines or whatever is there. An ERP will be able to support all of these. So you can pretty much have an MNC, for example, have users do transactions in various currencies or local currencies in their respective countries, and the system will be able to easily integrate all of these. Just an example. So there are 4 more other benefits on the localization and globalization perspective, and that is where a single ERP can really give a lot of benefit to the organization. In addition, finally on the architecture side, so an ERP typically signifies a unified system, and what in present day parlance is called a single source of truth, SSOT. Now SSOT is a pretty simple concept. What it means is every data element is stored only in one place. Now this is very similar to normalization in databases, but this is normalization at an enterprise level, meaning when you have a single ERP, you will, across all the business functions, the ERP ensures that a data element is stored only at one place. And what this means is any other places where this data is used will probably be on a reference basis. So when you update in one place, you will end up updating all the references automatically. There is a cascading effect on this. So what this implies is an organization will always have valid data, not incorrect and outdated data, which is pretty important, because incorrect and outdated data can actually mean a wrong business decision, for example, in some cases. So SSOT is pretty important. It's a very common parlance nowadays, and ERPs generally ensure that this is managed or maintained. So next big benefit is on the technology side. So technology is something that changes very frequently, and it's very difficult for organizations to keep pace with technology with their in-house homegrown systems. And also businesses want to keep pace with technology because technology can be leveraged to improve build in capabilities with which the organizations can derive a lot of value. So ERP vendors are very proactive in that, and they keep pace with the technology. So any new versions that are rolled out typically have newer technology already incorporated in it for customers to use. So I've just listed some of the technologies, but there are a whole lot of newer technologies that are coming up, and this list will always be outdated at any point of time. So SOA has been around for quite some time, and ERPs have also started have integrated SOA capabilities in the product. Now, this has been pretty much used on a very small scale, but in the past few years, ERP vendors have really gone very big on this, and these capabilities help us in integrating the application with third-party applications, that other third-party applications that an organization uses, which are not replaced by ERP. And then you have Web 2.0, which is also pretty popular, and this has enabled collaboration, more effective collaboration, better user connectivity. So these things help an organization in getting more value out of the product. BI, business intelligence, has also been there for quite some time, and these provide some of the applications of BI is customizable dashboards with which a user can get all the information that they need in one single place. And this is very useful from a metric standpoint, and getting the metrics, kind of like what are the sales, what are the leads, what are the sales opportunities, how is the inventory getting managed. So there are a lot of metrics that can be derived, which when placed on the dashboard can give a single point of view for a top management person. In addition, dashboards also help in managing very well, which is you can have KPIs, define the KPIs, customize the dashboard to suit that, and you can very well see how somebody who's responsible for pursuing a sales opportunity, how well they're doing. So technology, these are technology benefits, benefits from technology which can assist a business. Integration. Now, when I say integration, there are actually a couple of aspects to it. So first is integrating the various business functions. Typically, any established organization, or even an organization which has been around for a few years, they tend to have a lot of in-house applications. Now, these applications function in silos for the most part, and the data sharing is not very effective or possibly not there. Now, these an ERP, when it comes in, when a full suite of ERP, when it actually replaces all the in-house functions, brings in an integration of all these functional areas. It replaces all these independent, disparate applications, replaces them with a single product, and hence all the business functions are very effectively integrated. This integration leads to a data sharing between all these functions, various functional areas, and that can really benefit an organization from all points. And integration also helps in building good workflow. So all ERPs, for the most part, come with good business process management BPM suites. So we could actually build very good workflow in the process, and also build in a good transparent approval process. Now, apart from the business functional level integration, so there are also a technical level integration, which I need to talk about. I mean, it would not be wise if I don't touch upon the technical level integration aspect of it. So that's where EAI, Enterprise Application Integration Framework, comes into the picture. So there are times when we may not be able to integrate all the in-house applications, or replace all the in-house applications with the legacy applications with the ERP and ERP product, and sometimes integration may be required. So I will talk a little bit about this later on the subsequent slides. So, but here just want to touch upon the EAI concept here. So AI basically it's an integration framework. It enables integration of independent disparate applications that are there in the organization. And given the nature of these applications, the integration is not pretty simple and straightforward. So there are certain methodologies which are defined here, which are used here for integrating these. So typically these integrations will be a cross-platform program communication methods, so using message brokers or message queues and all those stuff. And some of the methodologies are OOPS, Corba, COM, middleware, message queues, and there are a few others also. So but these are the pretty common ones that are being used. And there are companies which do just this work. They specialize on this. They allow integration, and not just between legacy and ERPs, it's also between cutting edge ERPs, because there are customers who have different ERP products for different business areas, and the integration needs to be there for the organization, and that is achieved through this. So in such cases, typically the data sharing will be through XML. It's a pretty standard format, and that makes the data sharing pretty easier. Coming back to the benefits section, so this is by far the biggest benefit that an organization looks for in an ERP: improved decision-making capabilities. Now, for the most part, any organization, when they invest in an ERP, and this is probably the core reason why they would go with it, because one, data is not available at their fingertips, or the right data is not available at their fingertips for them to make more informed decisions, take business decisions. And that is where an ERP will really help. ERPs come by default with good analytics and reports, and it can be customized to generate the reports as per the user's needs. And as discussed before, we have dashboards which are there, and dashboards with drill down capabilities. Let's the top management actually drill down, or even any user as a managerial position, allows them to drill down and get down to the lowest possible level of data to understand what is going wrong, if something is going, they want to analyze anything. Embedded decision support systems are available, which have a lot of capabilities, which helps in deciding, knowing what will happen if a certain decision is taken. Better forecasting models. Now, these forecasting models, when I talk here, it's from all aspects. It's from a financial standpoint, from a sales standpoint, and purchase, inventory management, everything. So good forecasting models are already built in. There are industry standards which are already built into the product, and they're also customizable. Products are also customizable in building models which a user would require. And as I said before, workflow is something which also comes with all the cutting edge ERPs, and that enables delegation, and with delegation and also provides more control for the management. So this is also a very good significant benefit from an operational standpoint. And transparency and accountability. Now this is pretty important, because in any organization, people need to know who is responsible for what, and that information has to be available. Now by nature, given the nature of the ERPs provide transparency and accountability, because whatever work is done is being recorded, and everyone knows who has to work on what, and that kind of information is available. And these are some of the things, the accountability in particular are some of the things which public sector enterprises generally look for when they go for an ERP. Now, in addition, improved accessibility by data access anywhere and anytime. So this is primarily driven by technology. It is now all information is available in smartphones and iPads and all other tablet PCs, which is actually because of the technology that is available right now. And this allows people to have information, users to have information, access to information wherever they are. They don't need to be in their office, so they get information right in their hands, and this enables top management to take some quick decisions in cases where they need to act quickly. So overall, all these together helps businesses in managing, organizations in managing everything much better. So there is an overall improvement in the management aspect, which is the core reason why organizations generally would like to go for an ERP. Productivity improvements. Now, with the integration of all the business functions, like you have the warehouse and the sales team and the marketing team and the production. So with all the business functions integrated with data sharing available, and workflow capabilities already built in, all these translates into improved productivity for an organization. There is optimum utilization of materials, manpower, and machinery once an ERP is implemented. And this improves turnaround time in fulfilling orders and reduces the inventory holding. So companies can even look to move into just-in-time model, so that will lower their cost of managing inventory, faster turnaround times, and overall a better customer experience. All these translates into overall better customer experience, which is what organizations look for at a high level. Coming to the next benefit. So cost. Now cost is something which I would also talk about in the drawbacks. So it depends on from which angle we look at it. So I will talk from the benefit side right now, and I will also talk about the drawback side on the cost factor later on. So on the benefit side, if the ERP product replaces all the legacy applications, that would drastically reduce recurring expenditure down the line. Recurring expenditure in the sense that there would be lesser hardware that would be required to manage a lesser number of IT resources and lesser number of applications to manage. So all these translate into reduced recurring expenditure down the line. Okay. And this will be pretty significant for large setups, and for SMEs it may or may not be significant. That depends on the scale of the setup which the SMEs have. In addition, as I said in the earlier slide, so when optimum utilization of materials and machinery and resources, manpower is achieved, that will in turn lower production and manufacturing cost, which can also be significant down the line. So these are perceivable cost reductions that an organization can see once they go with an ERP, with a full setup of an ERP. Compliance. Now, this is pretty important in the sense that if organizations have to always operate within the rules and the regulations and the policies and laws of the local land. And with an in-house application, it's very difficult for an organization to comply with this because policies keep changing. Legal and regulatory requirements constantly keep changing, and it will be difficult for an organization to keep pace with that. And ERP products in general, enterprise applications, comply with legal and regulatory requirements called legs and regs in ERP parlance. And legs and regs are by default complied with, and any policy change, the vendor will proactively get these implemented in the product and roll out the upgrades to all the customers. So from that standpoint, ERPs are pretty good in ensuring organizations stay within the laws of the local land. Statutory reporting is another thing which governments mandate, and all ERPs generally have these built in the product itself. Another thing, when I say compliance, I also want to talk about the industry standards and practices. So for example, we have GAAP on the accounting standards, which is being used by in each country has its own gap, and we have IFRS, which is going to be rolled out and made mandatory soon. And products here, enterprise applications would be built from enterprise financial applications would be built based on these standards. And once IFRS becomes mandatory, they will automatically change the product to suit that. So it's not just accounting standards, it's any standards, guidelines which are there across all business functions. An enterprise application would be built on it, which allows organizations to leverage on these and improve or realign their business process. So an ERP implementation can actually turn out to be a good opportunity for organizations to realign their business process and adopt industry standards and practices in their business. So with that, covered all the benefits, and we will move on to the drawbacks. So drawbacks are pretty, there were quite a few drawbacks about 6-7 years back, and a lot of these have changed. Enterprise applications are slowly overcoming or countering these through technology, through process, through all other options that are available in countering these drawbacks. So some of the significant drawbacks right now which still remain are integration with other applications and challenges of implementing an ERP and cost, as I said before. So let's dive down into each one of these and talk a little bit about here. Drawbacks on integrations. So integrations, when I talk about integrations, I would like to split it into two. So one is with legacy applications, which legacy applications typically are applications which the organization has been using for quite some time for doing their routine work or routine process. Some of these may be mainframe applications, or some of them may be open systems, or typical or a traditional client-server architecture. Now, if it is a mainframe application, integration would become pretty complicated. Complicated in the sense that, and the ERP, we may have options available. An ERP suite, one of the suites may be able to replace these applications, but it will be extremely complicated and expensive to replace it. Expensive not in terms of cost, but also in terms of resource requirements and productivity loss and all those aspects. So most of these legacy applications are getting replaced, but there are still cases where it is difficult, it is complicated, and customers would prefer sticking to the legacy application integrations with the ERP product. And while even as the employees would have been using the legacy applications for years together, and switching over to a newer application would be a pretty difficult task. So while talk about legacy applications, I also want to touch upon niche applications. Now, niche applications are something which typically is very, very critical to the business, very core business, and these applications generally cannot be replaced by an ERP product, and there is a very high possibility that the only option would be to integrate it. Integration that would entirely depend on the niche application and what kind of data that has to be shared between the application and the ERP, and what kind of workflow and all those other aspects need to be built in. So that part of it would have to be dealt on a case-to-case basis. I mean, we cannot say for sure whether it will be easy or complicated, but these chances of these occurring are there with any organization. Implementation challenge. So as said, so any ERP implementation is an opportunity for an organization to change the business process. Now that said, these changes are pretty difficult to roll out. Users always resist process change, and it's pretty important for the top management to adopt the new application with ease. And some of these can be eased, keep changing. There would be upgrades and maintenance upgrades and new the way, change the UI, change the way things are done. And so ongoing training for users is pretty organization has to take on. They're going with an EA. So by far the biggest challenge, biggest drawback with all cutting edge ERPs is the cost and the upfront cost. So cost vary business on a domain basis, so it varies from product to product, and these costs can be significantly high. Is it okay now?
Yeah,
is it okay now?
You can go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. Yes, sorry. Yes. So yeah, so I'll just have a huge upfront cost in terms of licensing and hardware and third party.
I think that's breaking. So, can you please come close to the mic?
Yeah. Okay. And in addition to the license cost, we also have the huge hardware costs that cutting edge ERPs require. The hardware needs of a ERP product have been increasing steadily because we build more technology into the product, and that in turn requires more hardware, and the hardware cost can also be significantly high. And you also have the third-party license cost, software cost, which is the operating systems and databases and other third-party software that are required to run an ERP product. And overall infrastructure costs also are pretty high because of the increased hardware and software requirements. So an enterprise application in general, traditional setup is a high investment option, and organizations need to consider this before going ahead. And in addition to the hardware and software, you also have customization, which may be required in the product. No ERP product can meet 100% of the needs of an organization, and customizations would be required, and these come at a cost. And also an ERP implementation requires support of internal resources to provide the current business process information and also help with data conversion and all these aspects, testing, user acceptance testing, and all these aspects. So all these together would translate into a productivity loss which the organizations have to manage. So these are again costs that come with implementing an ERP. In addition to the upfront costs, there are also recurring costs with an ERP product in terms of annual support cost. AMCs are pretty important to keep getting the maintenance upgrades, patches, fixes, support for any issues that the organization sees. So from all these angles, an ANC is pretty important for an ERP, and these also come at a cost, along with that AMC for hardware and third-party software also. And while the organization keeps growing, there may be need for additional licenses, and these would also increase our recurring expenditure. As I said earlier, in the benefits section also, I spoke about lowering cost because of an ERP. While in some cases, the additional licenses may not need to be purchased. That depends on the product. Some of the ERP products would require additional license purchase, and that is why the cost factor actually comes in both. So it entirely depends on the ERP product that you are actually choosing. And in addition, as with the upfront cost, upgrades and maintenance also come with costing from internal resource requirement. Internal resources will be required, and these also come at a cost. And ongoing training, because any upgrade and maintenance would translate into a change in the sometimes change into the UI or the business process, and users would have to be trained on the new process. And customizations would require consultants or employees. So this is the IT departmental expenditure, which would go up significantly when there is huge amount of customizations that have to be done in the product. So with that, we come to the end of the benefits and drawbacks part of it. So I'll just talk a little bit about the ERP solutions or the options that are available from a deployment perspective, and I will go into the pros and cons of some of these, and that will map a little bit into some of the benefits and drawbacks that we discussed earlier. So some of the options that are available is a traditional in-premise setup, which has been around for quite some time and still continues to be there. SaaS is something that has been picking up, and it's been becoming very popular now. And hybrid is something which some organizations are going through, which is a mix of both of these. So some of the key factors that we need to look at in selecting or going with what kind of a setup we need, what kind of a deployment we need, whether it's in-premise or SaaS, is the size of the company. So size of the company translates into licensing cost for the most part. So that's an important factor. Stability of business is, if the business process is going to constantly keep changing, then customization would be required constantly. So this is another factor which organizations have to look at. A stable business process is pretty easy to implement in an ERP in a stable business compared to a very process business that keeps changing. Forecasted growth. So forecasted growth is essential in assessing how long how many more, for example, licenses will be required, and what would be the scale of operations in terms of, say for example, if you're looking at inventory, the warehouse, or the sales and purchases and all those aspects. So those have to be factored in before deciding on whether to go with an in-premise setup or a SaaS setup. An organization which is going to grow very slowly may be okay with a SaaS model. An organization which is going to go very fast in-premise setup may be better from a cost perspective. So for the most part, all of these translate into the budgets that are available, the capital expenditure and the operational expenditure which the organization is willing to spend. And customization, which I spoke about earlier, is if huge amount of customizations are required, then a SaaS model may be a difficult aspect. And at the end of it, internal IT infrastructure, which is important. An organization needs to have a very strong internal IT infrastructure to have an in-premise setup. Otherwise, a SaaS model is definitely a much better option. So in-premise setup. So we just talk a little bit about in-premise and SaaS in detail. So some of the pros of in-premise setup is it's suitable for established organizations. Organizations have a huge set. They need a huge setup. The organizations are big. They have presence in MNC, global presence, and In such scenarios, a SaaS model may not really work, and in-premise setup is much better for big organizations because they provide flexibility in customizing the product, ERP product, to suit the business requirements. And integration with third-party applications are easier. An established organization will have a lot of third-party products, third-party applications, and integrations would become far easier with an in-premise setup. And overall, there's a lower risk in terms of data security and all other aspects because everything is managed in-house. The cons, as I said before, is high upfront cost which is required for an in-premise setup. Implementation time is much longer because the product has to be implemented in-house, configured. Implementation has a whole bunch of configuration that has to be done and customizations that have to be done. Users have to be trained, and so the overall implementation time is much longer with respect to in-premise setup. And the organization has to manage maintenance and upgrades of both hardware and software because everything is maintained in-house. And as I said, it requires very strong IT internal infrastructure. On the software as a service model, it's very suitable for SMEs, and because the costs are low, so there's a total cost of ownership which we need to factor in, not just the license cost, it's the complete cost in terms of license, maintenance, hardware, software, IT infrastructure, support people. When everything factored in, the total cost of ownership for a SME will be far low with a SaaS model, and this will allow them to invest in their core business and not spend a lot of money on IT. And faster implementation. So this is pretty beneficial because, and this would be a real factor when not much of customization is required. The business process mapping between the SaaS setup and when you do the business process mapping, the SaaS setup, if it matches very well, the organizations can go live very quickly within a few weeks of time. Okay? And because the overall IT is outsourced, there is a reduced IT infrastructure that is required, which also lowers the total cost. On-demand elasticity. Now, this is the biggest thing for an SME. So, since the SMEs keep growing, the SaaS setup can scale up pretty quickly to meet the growing demands of the organization. And from that perspective, this also becomes one of the big advantages for SMEs in going with a SaaS model. On the con side, portability. So if the SaaS model, if a customer the organization wants to move away from SaaS into an in-premise setup or move into another SaaS setup, portability becomes a big issue because all the data is in a different setup, and that buy-in from the vendor would be required, as the SaaS vendor would be required upfront, so that organizations don't have a problem in getting the data out. There's a little bit of a higher risk with respect to a SaaS model because of the vendor manages the software and data. While vendors do ensure security, it is still a risk which organizations need to keep in mind. Also, some of the SMEs have internal applications which they need to integrate with the SaaS setup, and that may be a difficult proposition in this case. And finally, while cost is lower for with the SaaS model, in the long run, which can vary from 5 years to 7 years time period, a SaaS model may actually turn out to be more expensive than an in-premise setup. So these are some factors which needs to be considered while going with in-premise or SaaS. So finally, we have this hybrid option which is being used by some organizations of late. It's a mix of in-premise and SaaS. So the core business pretty much will have an in-premise setup, while some of the independent applications like payroll and time and labor and some of the other applications like these, or CRM for example, organizations end up using a SaaS model for this. And there are some big organizations in global MNCs which actually use Salesforce.com and all these other applications. So this model is getting prevalent, and but it's not very popularly used, but we do see more and more companies adopting this kind of a model in their setup. So that pretty much wraps up my presentation. So I will open it up for Q&A. So there were a couple of questions which I saw on the site, so I will just answer those first. One of them is was a question on what are the tips that we need to keep in mind for go live, and one of the participants had said they have 30 locations. They're planning to go live on one, and they just wanted to know what are the tips to keep in mind for go live. So typically a go live is a pretty important phase in the ERP, and in this scenario you're trying to do a phased go live. A phased go live, if it can be done, I think that would be the best way to go about it, because any problems that you face would be very limited, and you could fix those problems and then you could roll it out slowly in other locations. So if phased go live is possible, it may be location wise, maybe functional wise, maybe process wise. So if phased go live is possible, that would be the best way to go with it. And some other tips are, you need to ensure that the product is very well tested, the user acceptance testing is complete without any issues, all the users are trained very well and they know how to find their way in the new product. Data migration and conversion is a very important aspect. Businesses, when they are functioning continuously, the data keeps adding up or changing, and during the implementation part, we need to ensure that just before go live, all the data from the legacy system is ported and available in the ERP, so that the business process doesn't stop or is not halted. So it is very essential to ensure that data is converted and migrated to the new application. In addition, a recommended way to run, if possible, would be to have a parallel run of the legacy application and the enterprise application, and have data flowing in to the enterprise application and see how users are able to manage it, manage the process, manage the work, and then cut over to the new application. Now that is something which is an ideal situation, very difficult to achieve, but if possible, that would be a very recommended way to go. And at the end of it, it's always good to have a fallback plan, which typically everyone has it. And I would just reiterate the point, it's good to have a fallback plan in case the ERP doesn't work when you go live on day one. Yeah. So there was another question on multiple bounds and routing, whether ERP support multiple bill of materials and routing. Support is available. There are products, enterprise applications where the support is available right away. There are some cases where it is provided as an add-on and also as a and customizable options are there. So these options are there. It varies from product to product, and we can we need to look into the enterprise applications, see what all it provides. Off the top of my head, I don't know how I will not be able to say which one supports it, but there are options available. So I have a few other questions here which I will take. One is, what are the drawbacks of ERP in healthcare industry? So I would presume, when you say healthcare industry, so there are a few, there are a couple of things which you need to look at. So I know of some enterprise applications like PeopleSoft which are very big in healthcare. So well, these applications cater to the business side of things for the healthcare industry purely from a the medical standpoint, this will be very most of the ERPs don't actually provide these features or functionality off the shelf, and these have to be customized, and that I see is the biggest drawback. Because healthcare industry has its own set of standards and guidelines and requirements, both from the regular business standpoint and also from the documentation and EHR and all those requirements, which are the standards and guidelines. Okay. So from that angle, those I see are the biggest drawbacks of an ERP from a healthcare industry perspective. So I see the next question here, which is with regard to integration. I know most of the ERPs, I'm just reading out the question, most of the ERPs do not match the whole process of any vertical, and integrations are necessary for fixing the gap. What is your comment on this? And I did talk a little bit about this in the presentation. So ERPs would never fit in with, there would never be 100% fit with any business process, any vertical. The reason is that in general, ERPs are built on standards and guidelines, and these there will be variations of these with in any business, and that's the reason why the fitment is not exact. Well, vendors are right now building applications for each vertical. It is not fully available because things change across verticals, across geographical regions. The way within the same vertical, across geographical regions, the businesses are done in a different way. So that's the reason why 100% fitment is not there. But vendors are getting there. They are providing add-ons or plugins for each geographical region, and they are building some baseline products for each vertical, and we would see more fitment or a better fitment of the ERP product to the business process in the years to come. So there's another question which is, how can the cost being an ERP drawback? It is only one-time investment. I think I answered the question here. So there, it's not only the one-time cost. There is also a recurring cost with respect to ERP, and that's why it can become a drawback at times. Can you suggest a book for a manager who's taking up ERP project implementation? I would pass on this question right now, so because there are books available. I don't know from the top of my head. Sorry, I had to pass on the question, but I don't know from the top of my head. But there are any good even a PMP certified project manager is pretty good to manage a project ERP project implementation, because at the end of it, it's a project implementation. Okay? So well, ERPs has its own challenges in terms of customizations and all those aspects, but for the most part, a good project manager who can manage even a ERP implementation with a little bit of a learning curve. Okay. In the final question I have here is, in hybrid model as described, whether SaaS data can be uploaded or integrated with an in-premise ERP frequently, like payroll data upload every month. It is possible. It is definitely possible because you would be able to pull out data from your SaaS environment and feed it into your in-premise setup from an accounting standpoint. Is here from a payroll. You're talking about payroll data, so from an accounting standpoint, it can be done. The frequency can be based on your payroll cycle. There would not be any problems. What you need to work with is, you need to work with your SaaS vendor to provide this information, this data to you, or you should be able to access it and pull out the data on your own or there should be some way to get that out. So you need to work with your SaaS vendor to make this available, make the data available, and then you can integrate it. Okay, very much. So I have another question here, which is, what is the cost of implementing an ERP solution? That varies. It entirely depends on the number of licenses that you need and some of what do you call the user base, your geographical spread. So all those factors come into the picture in the overall costing. So I can't say for sure. So because it also depends on the suite of products that you're taking. Because if you're taking the entire suite, the cost could run into for a industry-leading applications like SAP, PeopleSoft, and Oracle Financials, and all those. It could actually Oracle E-Business Suite. Sorry, Financial, wrong word. Oracle E-Business Suite. It could run into more than $1 million also. But if you're taking just financials or just the HCM or a single product, the cost may be lower. So it entirely depends on your need and your scale of operations. Okay, so if a PMP, so I have a question here. It is, if a PMP certified PM can manage ERP implementation, why are companies not hiring such PMs? This is again a question which there's no definite answer to it. It's entirely on the company basis. What I'm saying is, what you need as a project manager, there are certain capabilities that you need which are expected as a project manager, and those qualities are essential even for an ERP implementation. So as I said, there are certain other things that that a ERP manager who's implementing ERP should understand, but a good project manager will be able to learn and manage an ERP implementation. Okay. Requests to suggest good open source ERP. Is it so this is a question which I got here. Good open source ERP. I would provide an answer to this on the website in the TechGig site. So request you to post these. So this question on the site, and I will definitely answer them, because I would like to look at it. I don't want to give an answer from the top of my head. I will give an answer once I analyze and the options available. Same goes for the other question which I have here is an ERP which well suits for a media company. So I would like to understand what is the exact requirement here. So if you can post this question on the website, because when you're talking specific industries, requirements for specific industries, we need to most of the ERPs will take care of all your core functional or business functional areas. So what we need to look at is the product, that whether it covers or caters to the requirements which are specific to a media company. So this again is something which I need to analyze. I don't have an answer right away, but depending on your need, if you can post this question, you can provide more details on the website, on the TechGig site, and I will definitely see what I can, if I can find out an ERP for the media company. And I have a next question here, which is, during go-live phase, whether the parallel run of legacy and new systems is recommended. Is it possible or feasible for large enterprises? What could be the other option as a contingency plan as you conveyed? Yeah, it is. It is recommended, if possible, to run parallelly. So this is prior to go live. If you can run your live environment or environment parallelly with the legacy environment. So one is you can see how the data flows in, and the other thing is you can start off this parallel run with the baseline data from your legacy system, and during this period you will have your real-time data, current data flowing into the legacy system and to your ERP setup. So you would be able to cut over to the live setup much easily. If it is possible, it is recommended to do it. And the other options as a contingency plan is this kind of setup gives contingency plan is again on a case-to-case basis. So one is you need to have your legacy applications readily available to switch back if your things are not working with the enterprise application. But for the most part, in my experience, any ERP implementation, given the significant amount of testing and all those stuff, the problems that you see in go live, there will be problems, I won't deny it, but they will not be significant in nature, that to the point that you would have to fall back on to your legacy application to keep things moving. So the applications are pretty standard. The processes are well defined. So you have good. So you need to have good amount of user acceptance testing. Ensure data is migrated properly. So just before the go live date, you need to shut off your legacy application, pull all the data, migrate it onto the ERP system, and then you cut over to the ERP system and have a round of testing once you go live to ensure that the product works fine. And implementation partners generally provide very good support at this time, and even vendors, ERP vendors, big companies have people readily available to fix any problems that occur during a go live situation. So the support will be there. It's as a organization, as a customer who is taking a ERP, you need to ensure that your support structure is in place when any ERP is being during the around the go live time. Okay, so I hope I answered all the questions. The answers were satisfactory to your expectations. So that's all the questions I have. So if there is any other questions, just let me know. Or if you come up with a question later on, please post it on the site, on the TechGig site, and I will be more than happy to answer them. So I have one more question here, is request to give tips for gap analysis, which is important in ERP implementation. So yeah, so this is a good question. So the typical way in which gap analysis is done is you need to have what is called in this ERP parlance is an as-is process analysis, which has to be done. So you could have your implementation partner come in and you could do a complete as-is get a as-is process analysis done, and this is pretty important, because then the implementation partner will be help you in mapping the current process to the ERP, and that will highlight all the gaps that are there between the current process and the enterprise application. And these gaps can be addressed in two ways. So one is, that's where the organization has to take a call, is whether they want to adopt the standard processes that is there in the ERP, which means changing the internal business process, or there may be times when you would customize the ERP to suit the business process, current business process. Now that's a call which the organization has to take, and factoring in a lot of things. So that's typically the way gap analysis is done in ERP implementation. Any other questions?
I think most of the questions have been answered. Let's wait for some time to see if there are any more questions.
Sure. Okay, so I have another question here, which is how to conduct UAT at early stage, because sometimes users changes their needs later on and difficulty in implementation. So so this is a big challenge in in the ERP implementation. So while I spoke about the gap analysis. So once the gap analysis is done and once the uh, decision is taken on the internal business process change and the customizations that would be done, there would be a business process blueprint document that is actually prepared, and that uh, literally forms the entire implementation is run based on that. So any changes on the user requirements would actually turn into would typically implementation partners would not entertain. If it is trivial in nature, they may entertain, but if it is significant in nature, then they would not entertain that, and they would leave it to a later stage as a further customization. So uh, um, so and user acceptance testing is something that comes once the customizations are done and all the changes are in place. So what I would suggest in this case is you need to get a complete buy-in from all the stakeholders during with the business process blueprint document. So that buy-in would ensure that any changes with the user wants would be taken up later, and your implementation process will not get affected by way of constant changes required by the user. So while I would agree it is very difficult to actually take a stance like this, but it is recommended to go with this approach. Small changes can be accommodated, but significant changes have to be deferred for a later stage, because unless it's absolutely critical and the top management is driving those changes, because the reason is any change would delay the implementation time, the go live time would get affected, and vendors would increase their cost also. So the implementation cost would also go up with this. So, and you also run a risk of impacting the overall implementation by way of bringing in significant changes halfway down into the implementation process. So recommended is to defer these changes later on, but if it is totally unavoidable or trivial in nature or very critical for the business, then you need to work with your implementation partner and factor it in. And acceptance testing should be a literal sign off from the user saying they have tested it and they say the product is good to go live from their perspective, and any changes later on has to be taken up post go live as a separate customization.
I've shared one more question with you.
Okay. If after gap analysis, if the organization feels that not going for ERP, then generally organization pay for the gap analysis or not. Yeah, you need to. You would most probably have to pay for the gap analysis. In fact, if you are taking up a gap analysis as a separate task, which sometimes is being done, in some customers, some organizations do it, then you can actually you need to pay for the gap analysis separately. So that option is there, and it's up to the organizations whether they want to go with that option or not. So shall we divide gap analysis, implementation separately and charge individually? Yes, it does happen. It does happen. So if you're already uh, typically, if you're doing a gap analysis, you are going to be evaluating all the different options that are there available in the market, and you could get implementation partners to do a gap analysis. The only thing is it will increase your time, but it's something which you need to do to evaluate all the options in the market. So before you commit to something, and you can pay them separately. I mean, you can have a separate contract for gap analysis, and then you could have a separate contract for implementation. Definitely possible.
Yeah, I think all the questions have been answered now, so we can conclude the session.
Okay. So thanks everyone for taking time to attend this, and hope I have answered all your questions. And as I said before, if you do have more questions, post it on the site and I'll be more than happy to answer them. For the questions which I missed out, which I passed on, I will find a solution. I mean, I'll find the answer and I'll post it on the site. So please post these questions on the site and I will answer them within a few days. Okay. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Mr. Sriram, for your informative session on benefits and drawbacks of cutting-edge ERP solutions. It was indeed an enlightening session. I would also like to thank our participants for their support in making this webinar a huge success. The recording of this webinar will be available on techgig.com by tomorrow. The next session in ERP Systems Series is happening Monday, that is 5th March at 3 p.m. Topic for the webinar is tips for selecting the right ERP software for your organization. We will be having Mr. Anurag Gupta, Group Manager, Business Process Consulting as our guest speaker. So see you all at Monday 3 p.m. Thank you.